James asked me if I would come and talk about autism in relation to the health and social care work environment. And being a person with autism in that environment, I decided that I would talk about what it's like to be a person with autism in that work environment, rather than caring for people in that environment. So I apologise if that's what you came expecting to hear, because that's not what you're going to get today. Now, I think autism is characterised as a disability, particularly relating to social and sensory fluency. And I think it's an unfortunate word, disability. Not that I don't think I'm disabled, I am disabled, much more than I know it outwardly appears, because I've been told that a lot, and I'll talk about that a bit more later on. But I think it's an unfortunate word because people interpret someone who's disabled as automatically incompetent. And I disagree with that entirely. And what I think it means when you're disabled is that you're not functioning as expected, as the society would expect you to function. And if you look at it in that way, everyone at some point in their lives will be disabled for a period of time, for various reasons. But I know that today the focus is very much on autism. And I think some people might be wondering why we are focusing on autism today rather than any of the other disabilities that are around. But I think it's because when you have autism, you're disabled, but you're disabled with a difference, and that kind of makes you something else, and that's kind of the focus I want to take, really, because ever since I was very, very young, I've been told, that I'm something else, and I was always very aware from a young age that I was different to other people, very different. I was talking in full sentences at the age of 1, which drove my mother mad, and I was reading unaided by the time I was 4, which also drove my mother mad because she liked that time when we'd sit together and do that, and I wasn't a very cuddly child and not a very cuddly adult. But I was really lucky because even today, I'll astound myself with things that I'm aware I'm capable of, but there are days when I'll also put the washing in the fridge, quite literally. I do mean that. I am dyslexic and dyspraxic as well, and I'm sure that has something to do with it too. But I was very lucky when I was growing up because I was brought up with a lot of hippies around me, and hippies that tend to kind of celebrate difference and welcome that and really kind of encourage difference and that it's okay. And so during my formative years, I had a lot of support and I was allowed to be different, and it was okay to be different, and that kind of gave me a lot of confidence to go through the rest of my life up until quite late in my 20s, which was very, very difficult, especially particularly in school. But because during my formative years, I'd had that kind of acceptance, I think it gave me the confidence I needed to kind of cope. But the next slide that I move on to, I use quite a bit because I do a lot of other things. I'm an author, and I go into schools as a patron of reading. And this image on the next slide that I've used has been discussed quite extensively on my author Facebook page. And as we look at it, I'll explain to you why. But I just wondered what you see when you look at this image. What kind of things jump out at you immediately? Standing on a parapet, Superman. Someone thinks he's about to take off, and you said he. So what I see immediately when I look at that picture, because I am what and who I am, is that the sky is green. That sky should not be green. When is the sky ever green? It's so wrong. So the only time, in my head now, I'm looking at this picture and I'm trying to think, well, when is the sky ever green? The sky must be green. It is, sometimes the sky can be green if there's a thunderstorm about to start, particularly in New Zealand and certain parts of Canada. So that was, for ages when I first saw that, that's all I couldn't see beyond that green sky. That really, really caught my attention. But when I was about to take it in, I'd actually chosen it because of the cape, because of the superhero kind of theme to it. I don't know whether that's what the original artist intended, but that's what kind of stood out after the green sky. And so I put it on my Facebook page to say, what does this say to you? And people were came on and they were saying, you know, the usual superhero, the child's about to jump off, etc., etc., etc. And then a lot of people, somebody came on and said to me, well, I do hope you're going to have a girl as well, so it's gender equal. And I went, but that's just a child. You don't know whether that's a boy or a girl. There's nothing in that picture that says what gender that child is. And so it went off on a completely different tangent in this long discussion of that. And I started thinking, actually, the way I see things, I know that I see things differently, but that really kind of made it stand out for me. A, that no one else had commented on the sky, which was the one thing I couldn't get beyond for ages. And then also that people were going, oh, it's a boy, it's a boy, it's a boy. What was it about that picture? Because for me, it was just a child. And the thing is, with people with autism, we do really take things at face value. We hear words that are said. We don't hear inflections. We don't hear inferences. We don't take hints. Those kind of things. And I guess it's kind of the same visually as well. I just saw what I was presented with. I think as a child, because the cape is so big, actually I don't know that that's a child, it could be a short person, but that cape's so large that that child must be wearing an adult's cape, is all I could kind of put together. And a lot of people did say it looked like he was about to jump off a roof. And I thought, well, how do you know that? He could just be standing on a dock in the water, looking over there about to go cod fishing, or, you know, all the kind of things I used to do as a child. And there's no kind of, what makes you think that's a roof? You know, but there's a lot of people that are neurotypical, so people who aren't autistic do look at things in a certain way that I found that people who are autistic don't look at. So it's just quite an interesting visual expression of differences in the way we view things. Now, working in health and social care, I do think, as in with the rest of society, majority rules, we kind of have to work that way, we have to live that way, that's how we function. And so I do feel, for me as a person with autism working in health and social care, I need to fit in with neurotypical people. I can't go, oh, I'm autistic and this is the way I do things. Well, that's not acceptable, because we have a good set of rules within health and social care of how our behaviour is expected to be. And so I work very hard to kind of adhere to those rules. And I do like a good rule, me, actually. I really like a good rule. You know where you are with the rules. Particularly because the NT world, the neurotypical world, the non-autistic brain world, is really quite overwhelming. For those of you who aren't autistic, when you walked in this room, your brain kind of would have picked up on different things, the sound of the projector, the lights are quite bright, perhaps the traffic outside, and it would have then immediately gone, actually, it's okay, you don't need to worry about it anymore, it's safe, it's not going to do you any harm. I can't stop hearing any of that. Plus all of you guys fidgeting, the sound of your breathing, swallowing, papers moving, pens, all of that I can hear. And so it's really it does kind of really get on top of you, and you have to kind of dampen that down all the time. So it doesn't always work, but to control my behaviour and to not fly off the handle and say inappropriate things, particularly when I'm trying to process and kind of dampen those things down and someone distracts me, I really just want people to shut up. But of course, it's not an appropriate response. You really can't do that. And so I'm constantly hyper aware of what's going on and what my behaviours are, so I can control my behaviour. Very, very important in health and social care, where clients are expecting you to behave in a certain way because they really trust you and they put a lot of faith in you. But sensory overload is very, very much like having something in your eye that you can't get out, you can't leave alone, or an itch that you can't scratch. It's kind of always there. And you can kind of grit your teeth and work beyond it, but it doesn't go any more below the surface than that. So all of that just drives me bonkers, but under the surface. Although when I was a kid, it wasn't under the surface. But it also makes me very anxious, because I am always very concerned that I'm not going to stay in control and I am going to say something inappropriate. And then it'll be horrible and I'll lose my job and I can't go, oh, well, I'm autistic. Because I really don't believe that I can use autism as an excuse. I do use it as an explanation quite a lot, because I'm quite openly autistic. But if you can't use it as an excuse. And so it does make me very anxious. Now, I do think people with autism are different. But I also think we're quite similar as well in many ways to neurotypical people. It's just the degree, I suppose, to which anxiety affects us, because everybody can be anxious at some point in their lives. We're not the only people who are anxious and that kind of thing. But I quite like a good routine, and I operate with the adult version of a timeline. Younger people tend to use pictorial timelines. I still am quite reliant on my timeline. This isn't my actual timeline. I just tried to do a short form one to show you guys kind of things that might go in a timeline. So, you know, my normal activities, daily living in the morning, lots of tea, that kind of stuff. Cycling to the train station. So this morning, those first two things didn't even happen, which is just typical when I've got, makes me quite anxious anyways. I have to travel here and give a talk, even when I'm teaching midwifery. But today I got up and the internet didn't work. Now, I always go on the internet with my first cup of tea. That is what I do. That is my routine. That's what has to happen. I get up early to do that before my husband and my children get up, so I can do that, because that's what I have to do. No internet, no phone, different providers. And we deliberately have different providers so this can't happen. So that if I can't go on the computer, I can go on my phone, because I have to do this. And my husband's very understanding. My husband's not autistic. The psychiatrist said he's perfectly normal. I still disagree with that. However, he insists he is too. Something to do with going to football. I'm not quite sure I followed that at all. But so he deliberately understood. So we have a different provider for our broadband. We have a different provider for our phones. Both were off this morning. No idea what was happening. It appears to only have been in our part of the city, because by the time my husband got to work, it was fine. But I have grown up and I have learned in my years of marriage that it isn't appropriate to then go wake my husband up and make him come make it work. Because actually he's quite good and usually he can do that. Today he wouldn't have been able to. So I sat there, I paced back and forth, till he finally got up an hour later and he couldn't fix it. So that really has stressed me out today. The other thing is, I cycled to the train station to catch the train because driving is very stressful for me. I can drive, but it's very stressful. I tend to get quite sleepy when I'm stressed out. Not the best thing if you're driving. And I know Spur Road takes about 12 hours to go down now. So I thought I'll take the train. I'll be nice and relaxed when I get here because I can walk. There was a fatality on the train tracks at a junction in where they couldn't bus us around and then get me here particularly in time. So that was awful, and I was, quite hyper aware that I was very lucky that nothing in my life had ever been so bad that I felt the need to be killed by a train. But I was also freaking out because I thought that if I didn't come, everybody would think it was because I couldn't, emotionally. And that's a really big deal for me because I want to prove that actually I can. So I phoned my husband and I said, the train's not working, what do I do? Because unfortunately, if you're married to someone with autism, your partner does become your carer to some degree. My husband said, well, there's nothing you can do because the car is in the carport. Now, I can't get the car out of our carport because it's about that narrow and our car is about that wide. And I said, well, I have to go. And so I went home and I actually got the car out of the carport. I drove about a millimeter at a time and I managed to get the car out and I drove here. So that's been terribly stressful, and I think I'll probably go home and just go to sleep. And I've completely gone off on a tangent now. But I just wanted to say the timeline's wonderful. It really is a lifesaver for me. But what I didn't do was put in contingency plans for those two things going wrong. Because I know normally that, say if I had a flat tire, I know what I would do about that, and I would walk to the train station. Those kind of things are already built in. But I'd never expected so many things to go wrong. And so I think I've learned from that I need to make my timeline more detailed. It is more detailed than this anyways, but I think although, we are different, we are similar too, because everybody else who's not autistic has a timeline to some degree. You know what's expected of you during the day, you know what time you're supposed to be somewhere, and that's kind of reassuring, isn't it, to know what's expected of you, to have your own timeline. It's just that perhaps you don't need to write it down to some extent. But you do have diaries in your phones or, paper diaries, off duties. And particularly in teaching, we have really quite detailed timelines. They're called timetables. Now, this is the one that I publish on my BU, but my own tutor copy of my timeline is really, really detailed. So in that right-hand column, I've got loads of things to remind myself to email the students, to tell them to prep, and what to do for that, and all those kinds of things. So again, I'm still carrying my timelines forward, I suppose, but it helps me function in work in health and social care to the degree that's expected. There is one thing, though, that I can always be relied upon, because in health and social care, any conceivable emergency that could possibly happen, we know what to do. We've got a beautiful set of rules for every single one of them. And like I said, I love a good set of rules. I've got them all memorized. I am the person you want if there's an emergency, because I know exactly what I'm supposed to do. And if that doesn't work, what I'm supposed to do next, and what everybody else is supposed to do. And it's a beautiful thing, even though something horrible is happening, because I know what's going to happen. And that's really, it's quite difficult to wake up every day and kind of not know what's going to happen or how you're going to feel when something happens, but kind of be able to predict. Whereas with an emergency, there's a flow chart for that, there's a flow chart for that, and you just kind of know where you are. Whereas other people, I think, might feel less comfortable with that because that's really derailed them. You know, you're having a lovely birthing experience and all of a sudden, you know, the woman's bleeding to death. But I just kind of unpack the flow chart and off I go. So I think there's advantages to having people with autism working in health and social care. But I do have to say, one thing that still surprises me is I'm quite open about being a midwife with autism. And I do it under my author name, but I'm not hiding, it's just that I happen to write under a different name. So many people say to me when I tell them I'm autistic, well, they seem to work very, very hard to try and convince me that I'm not. That but I've known you for, I can't believe it. As if it's like some whim that I've woken up with that day. Like, do you know, I fancy being autistic today, actually. Instead of actually having been diagnosed by an expert in the field after, you know, long, long hours of assessment. And it does amuse me. But one thing that doesn't amuse me is the amount of people that say, but how can you be a midwife with autism? Because people with autism can't feel empathy. And I think, what fresh hell is that? Like, where do people come up with these things? And preparing for this, I actually did look into that a bit, because I've always just been so kind of busy about arguing about how, well, actually that doesn't matter. Let me tell you how I do my job. And I thought there must be something in it that many people come up with the fact that people with autism can't feel empathy. And when I look back at it, it actually used to be part of the classification criteria was that we were unable to demonstrate the ability to feel empathy. And I thought, well, that's ridiculous, because while that might be true that we can't actually feel empathy, which is described as the power of imaginatively entering into another person's feelings, I would argue that unless you've had those feelings yourself, you can't do that either. So actually all you're doing is remembering what it's like to have those feelings. You're not being empathetic. Understanding others' motives. You can't tell me, even if you're an empathetic person, that you can understand everybody's motives. Rubbish. How can you do that? There's going to be somebody you don't agree with, so how are you going to understand their motives? But I can always see both sides of an argument. I don't understand both sides of the argument, but I can accept that there are two sides to the argument. And actually that both might have valid points. It doesn't mean I understand them, but they've got their own worth and their own validity. And I think that would help me really understand someone else's situation. Certainly people used to say to me before I'd had children when I was a midwife, well, how can you be a good midwife if you haven't had children yourself? And I kind of understood what they were asking me. And after I'd had children myself, I thought, well, that's made no difference. I was a good midwife before, I'm just as good a midwife now. But I think sometimes you do need to kind of go through that. What I like is this description of empathy, although I don't necessarily think that it means empathy. It says empathy is really the opposite of spiritual meanness. It's the capacity to understand that every war is both won and lost. Now, isn't that true? There's always winners and always losers when there's war. And that someone else's pain is as meaningful as your own. You're not feeling empathy for their pain. You're validating their pain. It's as meaningful as if you were in pain. That's it. That's not empathy. And do you know what I think that is? I think that is compassion, not empathy. And people with autism are capable of great compassion. Now, I know from being so out on social media that there are a lot of people in health and social care who are autistic, particularly doctors. They send me direct messages, we talk about it, there's a lot of them out there. Unfortunately, they're not really kind of out as autistic because there is fears over our jobs, and I think that's quite unreasonable really, but I can see why they would worry about that. And I think it's really good that we're capable of feeling such great compassion because it's one of the 6 C's. And we're also capable of feeling all of the other ones as well. So I don't think really the fact that we aren't empathetic people is meaningful at all. What I think matters is that we're capable of great compassion, competence, we're good communicators, honestly we really are, but we have to learn it. But just like you guys learned it at your early age, we just kind of have to relearn it every day, and I'll talk about that a bit more. We're very courageous, because you've got to be courageous to actually go out and work in health and social care, even if you're not a person with autism. That doesn't make us special. Just working in health and social care makes you special. And we've got great commitment, because you've got to be committed, and we care, obviously. And I do think it's really difficult, because giving this talk, I'm talking about me and things that I experienced, but I think I'm just as individual as any neurotypical person's individual in talking about themselves. They're not describing every other human being on the planet, and I'm not describing every other person with autism. And I have different coping mechanisms because of my upbringing and things like that than other people with autism will have. But I think we do have similarities, particularly we all have difficulties related to social and sensory fluency, and this is really quite significant in terms of health and social care and everyday life. Now, this isn't a thing, the fluency quad, but there are 4 areas particularly where we struggle, and I called it the fluency quad. I don't know what it's actually called. But social communication, someone referred to it as the outside joke, and I thought that was absolutely brilliant, because lots of people have these inside jokes at work, and they're all pally, and there's always me, I never get it. Now, I might be sitting there and laughing along with everybody else, because actually laughing even when you don't get the joke feels good still. But I just wait till everybody else starts laughing. It doesn't mean I get the joke. I never ever get the joke, actually. One of my sons is exactly the same. So that's quite difficult, really, particularly also in terms of understanding facial expressions or tones of voice, or when people are giving you hints. I don't get it, and I think a lot of us are like that. And so our other senses kind of have to come into play to kind of help us cope a bit more. But we do get it wrong, and I do offend people horribly, particularly colleagues, even when they know I'm autistic, and I have been told that I use that as an excuse when I've done something wrong, and I haven't been. I've been using it as an explanation. But some people are still angry with me over certain things I've said, or ways in which they feel I've snubbed them because I'm not very good with going out and doing work dues and stuff. Well, I'm not good at all doing work dues and stuff like that. And I'll avoid them at all costs. And that does really horribly offend people. And I do say to people, honestly, it isn't you. It really is me. I know that's a cliche, but in this case, it's me. It's me. It's not you. Don't get upset. And so that brings me on to social interaction, really. I have purposeful friendships. I don't have friendships in the way that neurotypical people have. So I see them phoning up their friends, and I haven't seen them for ages. No, we're going out for girls' night out. I haven't seen the girls for ages. I'm really looking forward to it. To me, that's my idea of hell. I could not imagine anything I'd want to do less after having been out in society all day. I'm not agoraphobic. I quite like being out on my own. Because when I'm out and I go, oh, the air smells green, I know what I mean. Nobody else knows what I mean. And I mean, like, you know, it's, grass has been cut and things like that. I remember somebody at work gave me a cupcake once, and I smelled it, because we smell food, but I think that's a family thing, not an autism thing. And I said, oh, it smells of pink. And she didn't know what I meant. But we figured it out. She put strawberry flavoring in the white icing, and it smelled pink to me. I didn't know how to explain it. So, I digress again. So social interaction, really, I only have purposeful friendships. So I don't think I have friends in the same way as other people, and I don't feel a need for it. I don't feel lonely. I have people that I run with. I have people that I swim with. I have people that I cycle long distance with. I do a lot of sport. And I have people here, so when I travel up to Bournemouth, there's people I will seek out to have lunch with because I genuinely really like them as people. But I don't call them friends, because I would never go to their house. I've got people who say to me, oh, you're in Bournemouth, pop over for a cup of tea. Really, no, I just want to go home. And that really upsets people, because it's a rejection of them. And I am aware it's a rejection of them. But I don't mean it in that way. And again, it's me, it's not them, it's nothing they've done wrong, it's just the way I am. And I think, I don't know that all autistic people are like that, but I know quite a few people with autism who are like this. But I'm sure there's people with autism who really enjoy neurotypical friendships as well, and go hang out with people because they really enjoy being with them. And I enjoy being with the people that I go out with, but only for that period of time for what we're doing. Once the run's over, I don't want to go for a cup of coffee and a piece of cake. I want to go home now. It's done. So that does get quite difficult at work when people are really, really pally together and they're like, oh, we're all going for coffee, let's go for a coffee together. I don't want to do that. I have no need. I've come to do my job. I'd like to now go home because I've done my job and I've been paid to do to the best of my ability. That's it, finish me, that's that line. And I kind of can't, it doesn't really blur for me. And other people say, oh, we're not friends, but we enjoy each other's company. And I can't do that. And again, that will cause difficulties in work. So I haven't got everything right, even after years and years and years of trying and learning coping mechanisms. And that's why I think it does help to be quite openly autistic, because I can use it as an explanation. Some people accept the explanation, some people don't. Social imagination is an interesting one. I quite like this phrasing. People say, how can you be an author with autism? Do you write about autism? I'm like, no, I don't write about autism. Heaven's sakes, I make up shit. It's much easier. I have to do too much factual stuff at work. I like making it up. And there's loads of amazing artists who are autistic, and musicians make beautiful, beautiful music. And we can imagine all these stories and all these things that happen. But when it comes to having a social imagination, so there's a situation occurring, we can't kind of imagine what to do next. So it's very difficult. I kind of don't, people will come into my desk and I'm working and they'll start talking to me and I'm like, really? I'm working? Focused? And they expect me to stop that focus. And I've spoken to Jayla so many times, I said to him, I wish I could just work in a glass box. And he's like, well, you can't get over it. And we talk about PhDs, and I'm going, well, he's going, if you find something you're interested in, you will love it. And I think that's quite a good description of me, really. If I was really interested in what they were asking me, I would probably actually be willing to break my concentration, change my focus. But when I go to another office to talk to somebody else, I don't quite know what, so I kind of stand here waiting for people to notice me, because if they're head down focused, I don't know when it's a good point to interrupt. And so I have to, and then you can, they look at, they're like, we've been waiting for you to speak for ages. I'm like, I don't know when I'm supposed to. And so all those kind of things are very difficult. So if people are chit-chatting, again, I don't know when to interject, because I'm aware that quite often what I say isn't what they're saying. And I'm only talking about what I'm interested in, and I just was waiting for a good point to kind of drop in what I want to talk about now, because they're really boring me. So I've learned not to do that so much at work now, but it's still difficult. And so if I do get into conversations and kind of it goes a bit wrong, I can't kind of really imagine my way out of that. I can't figure out how to fix it. I don't have that social imagination. And actually it does make me really quite vulnerable socially as well. And as an adult, I'm nearly 50, you wouldn't think I'd be vulnerable from a social point of view. You think I'd be quite savvy, but I'm not actually. I'm as vulnerable as a 12-year-old girl, really. So when I go on a journey that I haven't been on before, my husband literally will write out step by step what I do, what I take, where I go, and then do it in reverse again as well, because nothing is ever actually literally reversed. And he'll write down, so the train, you have to change, you have to go to this platform now, and all that kind of stuff, because if something's gone wrong and I can't find a conductor who I know is safe, I can't imagine my way out, and I will literally just stand on the platform and not know what to do. And no, I can't talk to somebody because they might be dangerous. It's not a good space to be in. And I don't think I'm ever kind of going to get around that now that I'm nearly 50 and I haven't figured it out yet. And for me, that's why I love rules. You know where you are with a rule. You know where you're expected to behave. It's all very good rules. Now, sensory difficulties for me particularly make things really, really challenging, because these are what make me very, very anxious. And I already talked to you about how I don't have sensory adaptation like neurotypical people have. My brain doesn't go, oh, that's okay, don't worry about that. My brain goes, focus on that, because it might change, and then you'll have to change, and you won't know what to do. And that's all kind of going on under the surface. And someone's phone's ringing. And it's not just kind of that stuff going on as well, because also I have a really hypersensitive sense of smell and taste. And so there's lots of things like I can't eat egg because they smell too strongly. I can eat egg, but I can't then go do the dishes with the egg in the pan in the sink because it makes me gag because it smells too strongly. And that probably sounds very bizarre, but this will sound even more bizarre actually. So I swim a lot. Always swim Wednesday evenings, 8 till 9, that's my time, that's when I do it, that's the rules. And I go in and I swim and I do length after length after length after length. It's one of the things I've found is exercising a lot keeps me off medication. And that's why I exercise a lot, because actually I'm inherently lazy ass. I like nothing better than laying about, eating and reading. Love it. But it's not very good for me psychologically, and I tend to get really, really hyper anxious. And I only sleep about 3 or 4 hours a night anyways, so I need to wear myself out. And so one of the ways I can do that is by exercising a lot. And so I swim 8 o'clock Wednesday evenings. I take swim lessons because I want to get better, for reasons I won't get into here because it'll go on far too long. But I want to get better at swimming, and so I take lessons. And so half the pool is for lessons, half the pool is for public swimming at this club I go to. Now this club is amazing because it's got blue lighting. I don't know why they do it. I think it's probably women friendly or something like that. But it's perfect for someone with autism swimming. You walk in, it's all dim, and the lighting's gorgeous. You get in the pool, and there's all this white noise. As soon as you put your head in that water, there's none of this nonsense going on. Just water. It's so good. Water and bubbles and breathing. Love it. However, during my lesson, it's a lesson I share with other people, but during the lesson, people come in swimming in the public. Now, I bathe at least once a day, usually twice, shower in the morning, bath at night. That's just me. I like doing that. That's my routine. I know people don't do that. Some people don't even bathe every day because when they get in the pool, I can smell them and taste them. It's really horrible. It's very distracting. And my swim teacher has learned that this is very distracting for me because I will stop in the middle of a lane and just stand up and start doing that, looking for the person that's got in the pool that absolutely stinks. Because I can't just carry on swimming because I have to stare at them because they smell so bad. And it might be sweat, or it might be the fact that actually they might only go home and shower after they've been swimming, and then the whole next day they've had their bowels open, and they've urinated, and they sweated, and I don't know if I can smell it or taste it, but it's in me when they get in the pool. And because I don't have that sensory adaptation, it's always in me until I then go home and get it off my body. And it's an actual physical thing. I can't explain it. It's awful. And it isn't just their body odor. Sometimes it's that they wear a very strong cologne, or they wear a very, very smelly shampoo and conditioner, body spray. So that can make things very difficult, and it does make me very anxious because particularly now that I know the same 3 people are coming in at the same time all the time. So, but I can't change my swim time because I swim 8 till 9 Wednesday evenings. But this kind of thing also happens at work, and it's difficult if you have a colleague that comes in and actually there might not be body odor, they might be very nicely bathed, but their cologne's too strong, or their sprays, and that's my issue again, not theirs. But I've got to kind of try or someone with bad breath, and I'm just like, oh, I just can't stand it. And I think probably their breath isn't that bad. Again, it's me, I'm too hypersensitive to it. And I can't upset them, and I know that will upset them. I'm not completely ignorant, but it's really difficult to kind of be me and let them be them and keep that barrier. And James will let me have a glass box, and it's really unfair. But it's also absolutely brilliant, and I wish more people with autism in the health and social care field would come out, because I want to do a bit of research on this. Because one of the things I know is I can always tell when a woman is fully dilated, so she's ready to start pushing, or it's okay for her to start pushing, because I can smell her placenta. Now, I know for a fact nobody else can do this that I've talked to, because they all say I'm a freak. But when I first started practicing midwifery, women were never allowed to start pushing until we confirmed they were fully dilated by doing a digital examination, by putting our fingers inside her and actually sweeping around the baby's head to make sure there's no cervix left. And so whenever I could smell the placenta, I always had to do a digital examination anyways, and so I was always able to confirm that actually, yes, I can smell that every time a woman's fully dilated. And I would love to know if there's other people with autism in health and social care who have similar kind of ways of telling things without being invasive to the women, because it would be quite an interesting study to do, and actually could be quite groundbreaking that there are other ways. Because some of the best midwives or the best police people, policemen, policewomen, I don't know what you call them, cops, go on something called gut instinct. But what I wonder is it's not really gut instinct. Is it actually that they just are able to pick up differences, clump it together? Because I always know when something's going to go wrong with that birth. hours before it happens. Now, I don't think I'm psychic. I don't think I'm a better midwife than anybody else. I think it's because I'm picking up on something that's not normal, that I haven't actually identified what it is yet. And sometimes it might be the start of a cascade of things that build up and then it forms a picture for me. And I do think I can't be the only person with autism in health and social care who does that. And I quite like to actually speak to other people, but it's just something that's kind of trickling along now, because sensory difficulties do cause anxiety, but actually they can be quite useful too for us in health and social care. And perhaps it's something that we need to think about harnessing. I put overdone, overwhelming, and overrated in the middle of the eye because I really think eye contact is all of those things. Honestly, we don't need so much eye contact. I've learned to do it when I'm giving talks, but I just really not comfortable with it at all. And I don't think really that it's that necessary. So what does the fluency quad really mean in terms of getting the job done with working in health and social care? I think the next slide will probably, remember I said, we're the same but different. That we're something else. We're disabled with a difference. We are just something else, really. And I think the next slide will particularly kind of consolidate what I've been saying about how we can do this job just as well, but only just slightly differently. And I think when you look at this, you'll see what I mean. That's me, I'm the sheep. Every shift, that's me. Any questions? Okay, good. That's it.
Thank you.